I love Eurobeat, there's just one problem. I pass out whenever the lyrics of a Eurobeat song mentions a Sony product, but I'd say that's specific enough that it will never end up happening. 1994, in the gaming world, Sony releases their first of their dedicated gaming systems, the PlayStation. This system would go on to really get back at Nintendo and their dwindling success after they essentially betrayed Sony by saying no to their collaborative project out in the last minute and instead letting Philips release games with Nintendo properties onto their own console, the CDI. And while the only good to come out of the CDI was the revolution of YouTube poops using said Nintendo games, Sony was also driving Sega out of the console business as that company was struggling with the Saturn, as the games were lacking due to the primary Sonic game for the system having a rocky cancellation. But the Dreamcast, even if it couldn't save Sega from retirement from hardware production, actually learned from the PlayStation and had something Sony was a master of: style, or aesthetic, but I think people are getting tired of that term being used. The PlayStation, with its big and bold marketing as well as visual and audio elements in its software, really had gamers viewing the system as the coolest new thing on the market. So, what defined the PlayStation in terms of its appearance over the years, and how did it morph between console generations? Well, the PlayStation would start indicating how bold it was during E3 1995. As the iconic story goes, when Sega announced that the Saturn was already being shipped to retailers, this ended up backfiring due to it catching the market way off guard from its sudden release. The representative at Sony walked up to the stage after having her script ready, but they instead only said the price of the PS1, $299. It was one of the biggest mic drops in gaming history for pretty much saying fuck Sega, we're cheaper. The PS1 would release with the launch title Ridge Racer. A pretty standard racing game at its core, but it would indicate from the beginning of the Ridge Racer series that you'll be getting a style from these games like no other. Ridge Racer 1 would have this kind of intense, chaotic feel due to its soundtrack consisting of vocal samples and overall underground music genres. The songs that come to mind for me would be Rotterdam Nation as well as the Race Results music. These both give off crazy ass energy as they had constant use of incomprehensible vocal samples on top of fast-paced tempos. And the neat thing about Ridge Racer was that each game had a unique style, such as Rage Racer's gritty heavy metal influence and Type 4's early PS2 vibes, as it would be a late PS1 title. I really like how collected yet still energetic Type 4 is with its visuals and music. Now, a lot of the style of the PS1 would come from more of the console's presence in Europe, which had a very futuristic Y2K-ish style, and by Y2K I mean cybercore, not the completely unrelated shit that uses it as branding, you McBlink fuck! This style would be made evident with the European launch title Wipeout. This game had not only the distant future setting, but also a very strong soundtrack and stylish graphic design by the designers Republic, appealing to the ever-growing rave and club culture. In fact, the game was marketed with kiosks running the game installed in various clubs. I will admit the first Wipeout game was so primitive that core mechanics such as elimination weren't even introduced, but people really liked Wipeout and I can totally see why so. The game would be the perfect base for the rest of the series that almost completely consisted of banger after banger. People still looked back on 2097, also known as XL, and the fondest. And after playing it for myself, it still holds up very well today. In 1995, Tekken would be released, and it took a pretty interesting approach to fighting games, being a traditional fighter that had 3D stages, letting you sidestep as an extra form of avoiding enemy attacks, thus dawning the 3D fighter subgenre. Not to be confused with arena fighters like the Simulat or Cage Fighters, aka Power Stone for clones, though there were Cage Fighters that would be released before Power Stones such as Flipper, which would be asset and flipped into a rich game that birthed that one controller that feels uncomfortable to use. Tekken had this kinda weird art style with overemphasized lighting, which is kind of off-putting, but the visuals definitely fit the PlayStation's feel. Also, I'm not sure if I'll ever talk this much about Tekken again, so I might as well mention that I love the storyline of King in this game. Like, he fights using his wrestler persona for the sake of the children in the orphanage he runs. That's amazing. Another type of software on the PlayStation brimming with style is the demo disc, though the memorable ones that everyone talks about online are the ones from Europe, as they also reflected the Y2K-ish style in those. These had some pretty generic menus that were each used across multiple discs, but they were definitely cool and all stood out from each other. Oh, and shout out to the Fade to Black demo. From what I've seen, you can exit back to the menu for other games just fine, but for Fade to Black, you're told you have to reset the system, because the demo ends on the tagline, "You don't play the game, it plays you." Then not only does it literally fade to black, but it stays on that black screen with no music. That is so cool. And I'm definitely sure it must have left an impact on a fair chunk of the people who played the demo. Both the US and European demo discs had not only some great presentation in their own ways, but also had extra features that range from something as simple as gameplay trailers, to something as cool as extra content you can save to the memory card to use in full games. All of these added up to something PlayStation fans love to death to this day. Konami was part of the developers jumping ship from Nintendo's side, and they soon founded in 1997 a new division of their company and a new line for their rhythm games, Bimani. Though Dance Dance Revolution is the most mainstream, being referenced frequently in pop culture of the early 2010s, chances are when you're thinking of specifically the Bimani brand, you're thinking of Beatmania. This was a series where your control layout consisted of 5 keys and a turntable on the side that you slide across for the notes that appear for the turntable lane in gameplay, which then mimicked the feel of actual DJing equipment, and the menus in the games really wanted to reflect that, having this club vibe for the original game that also got a European release on the PS1, and plenty of other graphic styles for other games. While the series isn't technically around today, that's because it was reborn in '99 as Beatmania 2DX, which added 2 more regular keys to the gameplay. Though I suck ass at any rhythm game with more than 4 keys, since I also have to move my fingers around or keep them in an awkward position when playing a chart, I can still commend the Beatmania series for its unique gameplay. Bimani had other series such as Gitadora, aka Guitar Freaks, that would actually be the origin of the guitar gameplay style popularized by Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and Poppin' Music, which was centered around 9 whole keys on a massive controller, and also had this really cool art style. I honestly love it. Oh, and for some reason Disney was really wanting to collab with Konami and other companies for licensed installments in their series, DDR being one of them, which led to DDR Disney Mix, featuring remixes of classic Disney songs, including the infamous It's a Small World Ducking Hardcore remix. Can you believe this is what got me into gabber music? Back to more traditional PS1 games, the PlayStation had plenty of characters from a variety of games to be considered mascots of the entire PlayStation brand. You got the obvious choices such as Crash and Spyro, but some might also say Cloud, but you've also got characters from very unique games for their time, with mascot energy such as Parappa, Spike from Ape Escape, Lara Croft, and Mr. Domino. Yeah, from the absolute classic, No One Can Stop Mr. Domino. Yeah, and these games all had their own unique flair that contributed to the variety the PlayStation had. Parappa the Rapper had its bizarre storylines and a vibrant world that was regularly seen in other projects of the series creator Rodney A. Greenblatt. Ape Escape's soundtrack was known for really pushing forth the trend of jungle-style drum and bass music. Tomb Raider had gameplay that, despite being tank control based in which you walk forward with up and turn in place with left and right, still had a very good flow to combat regardless. And let's be real, a lot of what made the series so memorable were stuff like the cheat that makes Lara Croft fucking explode, poking fun at how Lara's character design is more based on looking hot rather than, surviving in the goddamn cold, and Mr. Domino alongside Irritating Stick were one of the few games with the wacky-ass Japan energy that were brought over. Unfortunately though, not every aspiring mascot was of a high quality, and what one of the things that made Bubsy 3D so infamous were level design textures, or at least the seemingly lack thereof, having these weird base color looks that just didn't look all that good. But hey, if you want a PS1 platformer where Lynn does a shrill voice that's actually decent, look no further than Tail Concerto. Thank God I mentioned Little Toe Bronx again. This is like gasping for air after holding your breath. Sure, Tail Concerto is definitely dated by today's standards, but this game had quite a lot for back then, yet stayed its welcome for just enough time. It had voice acting, animated FMVs, overall a fun little adventure, and it would be the start of CyberConnect 2's history of game development, as well as the entire Little Tail Bronx series that would only get better with Solitarobo and Fuga Melodies of Steel. And hey, if you were unknowingly indoctrinated into the furry community through a PS1 game besides this, it was maybe Bomberman Fantasy Race? I sure was. But there was also Klonoa Dorn of Phantom Isle, still regarded as a huge cult classic even today. The gameplay's tight, the presentation's lovely, and the plot can really make an impact on how you feel throughout it all. You should likely play the original version, by the way. The remake in the Fantasy Reverie collection is passable, but the Wii remake...
Hey, Hupo, listen. I was just wondering.
Yeah, late into the PS1's life, Doko Demo Isho, translating to Together Everywhere, was released. A pet sim that featured the ability to teach your little creature known as a Pokepea different vocabulary. This series is infamous for being very inaccessible outside of Japan, but chances are you've seen Toru Inoue, who pretty much became not just the mascot for the series after the first game, but also somewhat of a mascot for the PlayStation brand in Japan. This little guy made playable appearances in PS All-Stars Battle Royale as well as Street Fighter Cross Tekken, but if you want to play any games from his series, you better know enough Japanese, as the only game that can be played in English that isn't dead due to being live service based is Tor Let's Party, in which a pretty rough English translation is in the Hong Kong version. So yeah, the bare minimum here. With the character becoming more popular as of recent, at least as one of TikTok's brief hyperfixations, if there's ever another Doko Demo game, they've definitely got the opportunity to release it overseas. And so we move into the PS2 era, and that underground vibe is starting to be present in every region. The PS2 actually had 3 system menus, those being the standard menu, the feature-packed BB Navigator exclusive to Japan, and a pre-PSP and PS3 cross-media bar used for the PSX variant of the PS2. Not to be confused with a hypothetical PlayStation 10 or the PS1, not to be confused with the later variant named the PS1 as in the spelled out word, notable for being compatible with the portable LCD screen attachment. And I think the peak of graphic design within PS2 software is PlayOnline. Even though the Final Fantasy series is one of, if not the most mainstream RPG series out there, it actually had pretty unique gameplay styles between entries, from FF2 onwards, but Final Fantasy XI being the first MMO of the series made it still shockingly unique, and Squaresoft had to do something for account management for an online service early in the 2000s, so they had a separate launcher service, and oh my god, they went so goddamn hard with this. It looks so ethereal and like you're stepping into something like a museum within a utopian city. Damn, my synthesia going crazy RN. And the soundtrack, oh, there's a reason I use these songs from this so often for my video essays. Surprisingly, the PC version of the service is still up since the spare money from Final Fantasy XIV's profits are being used to keep the lights on for FF11 servers, and while having to deal with the clunkiness of the launcher is needed to play FF11 in the modern age, what's better, getting free AAA games or having gender euphoria while being mugged? My wallet's empty, but my heart is full. My art commissions are open with Cash App as an accepted payment. Contact me on Discord for more information. You can also support me on Patreon for perks such as shoutouts, promotions on your creative work, and special roles in future videos. Other PS2 games had some really cool art styles, like Magic Penjo. Now, this is just a simple monster-catching type RPG themed around drawing the creatures you occupy your party with, and the game deciding different aspects of that creature in battle. It's certainly an interesting concept, and it did manage to get a spiritual sequel named Graffiti Kingdom, but this art style has a very comfy feeling, and it's surprisingly because the art direction was worked on by several people who worked at Studio Ghibli, which reminds me of the opening cutscene to Musashi's Samurai Legend, the successor to the PS1's Brave Fencer Musashi. Damn, character designs from Tetsuya Nomura animated by people who worked on it in production for Studio Trigger anime? That sounds like a match made in heaven. I do have my doubts though, after the Oreo churros tasted like ash. So, this game itself is apparently a mixed bag, but come on, you can't just look at this opening and not be amazed. This is proof that Trigger was and always will be producing absolute bangers in animation. There was also Eco, one of the few PS2 games that chose to have a 240p resolution, but I'd say it strangely adds to the experience. It genuinely looks like the developers pulled the dreams they had out of their own heads and imbued it into their dev kits. It looks surreal in such a beautiful way. Kingdom Hearts, Okami, Final Fantasy X, a whole bunch of games felt pretty magical, really. They all look great for their time, and then there's Sonic Unleashed PS2. Sonic Unleashed versions remind me of Aladdin on SNES vs Genesis. Hear me out on this one. Aladdin on both systems are both 2D platformers, as you'd expect, but the SNES version by Capcom had more flow with its platforming, while the Genesis version by Hold the Phone League of Legends didn't exist yet, had an emphasis on combat, and had much smoother animations being spread in off hand-drawn sketches. Now, this illustrates my point about Sonic Unleashed, as this game at heart mixes the boost-style modern Sonic gameplay with hack-and-slash warehog stages, but the console versions could be categorized into one for the high-spec consoles, being the PS3 and Xbox 360, and one for low-spec consoles, Wii and PS2. But there are many differences between the high-spec and low-spec versions and the graphics on the PS2 version. Jesus. Persona 3 brought the series to a bit more people before the boom of Persona 5, which led to this review broadcast on the G4 TV channel.
Your emo freshman fights said demon things with entities called personas, like this angry apostrophe.
Good times. And speaking of TV channels, Adult Swim's Toonami block was very big around this time, which led to Samurai Champloo Sidetracked. This was basically a hack and slash that was, as the name implies, a side story set during the events of the anime. Now, yes, I haven't actually played the game myself, and I just brought it up because I really like the anime, but this looks cool going off of the gameplay footage. Well, maybe not looking cool, the character models look kinda disgusting, but you got your move tree displayed above during gameplay. That is such a cool design decision, and yes, I stopped this entire trial just to mention it, Your Honor. And so, the PS3 was on the horizon, and people weren't feeling it. The announcement on an awkward P3 presentation really left a bad taste in previously excited gamers' mouths. But hey, I would like to bring up as a side note that even before Sony turned things around for the console, the PS3 was powerful as another type of media device. During this time, Sony and Toshiba were having a video format war with Blu-ray and HD DVD respectively, and Sony was doing well, winning over a fair amount of movie production studios, but their main disadvantage was the price of disc players that support Blu-ray. But even though the PS3's initial price was infamous for being high as a game console, it was strangely one of, if not the least expensive option as a Blu-ray player, meaning that while the PS3 still had below average sales, the concept of a Blu-ray player that could also play AAA games that's incredibly cheap, it was a no-brainer for non-gaming consumers and this dealt the fatal blow Sony needed against Toshiba, and with the attempted retaliation of the Xbox 360 HD DVD drive just not working out due to being a peripheral rather than built into the 360 itself, it was evident who the winner was in that. Anyways, back to nerding out over menu buttons. I always liked how the cross-media bar looked, except for the menu itself. You do get confused, at least at first, with left and right selecting the category and up and down selecting the options within it. The icons are simple yet sleek. I always liked the background with this wave thingy. The startup sound was slightly altered in a later system update. Cool, I guess. You could change the color, the text font. You definitely had customization here alongside actual themes. My personal favorite is the Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward theme, showing a large shot of Ishgard having red tinted icons, which I do like. Having the menu sound effects from XIV itself, it's really cool. You also had the Family Guy theme.
Giggity, 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 giggity. Ha!
The duality of man. Ratchet and Clank fit right in with the futuristic branding of the PS3, and the advertisements were what the fuck-ish. And you know what other PS3 thing was futuristic? Wipeout HD, baby. And as someone who was introduced to the series by my brother through HD with its Fury expansion, once I had the visual clarity to see where I was going when playing, I fell in love with it. It feels so satisfying using the game's various mechanics such as the ability to restore ship health if the item you got doesn't serve useful, barrel rolling to quite literally hit the ground running to weave past opponents, hearing the announcer warn you of what items may hit you so you have a clear indicator of what to do to not lag behind. It is a technical racing game that takes genuine skill in order to get good, and has items be balanced enough so those hit need to work harder to keep their necessary progress up, while not costing them the entire race if they're unlucky. Also, while not expecting them to be ultra try-hard gods pulling off speedrun world record level strats to win it all, something Ring Racers really needs to take note of. I'd love to cover more of the Wipeout series some other time, or its spiritual successor Ballistic NG, as it is the perfect racing game series for PlayStation in general. Rock Band was the competitor to Guitar Hero that popped up on the PS3. I had some experience with the series a bit after I picked up my PS3 Slim at a yard sale for a very cheap $10, and finally broke out of my shell of only owning Nintendo consoles. I found a Rock Band guitar controller at Goodwill, but the catch was it requires a dongle for that respective game and instrument controller. But hey, that got me to complete my first wiring project, as I found software to have an Arduino act as a controller interface, and I converted the guitar into a completely wired controller. And with importing custom charts being very easy on the PS3, it's definitely a fun time, especially as a party game. The PS3 had loads of quirky, unique titles while still having the modern AAA games that would become the standard for today, such as Skyrim, The Last of Us, Portal, Uncharted, Bioshock, and plenty more. The system was perfect for how it celebrated tradition while still embracing the future, and the series that transitioned pretty smoothly into the modern gaming era was Grand Theft Auto. GTA 4 was critically acclaimed, and I love GTA 5 going off of my first few hours playing it. Being able to perform the titular act of nabbing any car that people are driving, that's fucking cool. And hell yeah, I can steal cars with emerald green paint. Funnily enough, it was the PS1 DualShock with the emerald green shell that really got me to love that tone of green. Final Fantasy XIII went a pretty different direction from the other mainline entries in a way, with how musical motifs weren't used here and the battle system didn't use MP at all, but still kept some series staples. The game has somewhat of a slow start, but it's still awesome during those opening moments. The characters have great dynamics, the fireworks scene is still one of the most beautiful cutscenes in gaming history to this day, and the paradigm-based battle system is pretty neat. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get past the goddamn Aster Proto-Florian boss. I fucking hate that bitch. Now, I've been holding off on talking about the Metal Gear series up to this point, because while I could provide a decent description for the games I haven't played, I could not realize the series' impact without playing the mainline entries myself. Metal Gear really hit it big on the PS1. Metal Gear Solid was so good it was regarded by some as the best game ever at the time. I do like how the game gets self-aware at times, even outside the iconic cutscene at the start of the Psycho Mantis fight. Metal Gear Solid 2 was also great, showing people that video gaming can really have complex theming in its writing. The GameCube got the Twin Snakes, a pseudo-remake of MGS1 that features over-the-top scenes. The series was doing pretty well, and it did not stop on the PS3 as we got Metal Gear Solid 4 and Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Now, I'll admit I played the latter because of its presence in meme culture back then, but I was hooked as hell by this. Now, people back then were a bit miffed by Raiden taking center stage again after Metal Gear Solid 2. Like, yeah bro, the Twink has a 1000-degree knife. But I do like his arc in Revengeance of him wanting to justify his sense of justice by uncovering a conspiracy about using the bodies of children to further the antagonist's plans, and trying not to go fucking apeshit on people for the first half of the game. And my second playthrough was a blast. My first playthrough was on easy, and on it, I beat the final boss with the suit that gives you 10 healing items right off the bat, so my second playthrough was pretty much my real first. Now with the PS4, the visual design is still there. It's much more formal, I guess. It's fine, really. It's just kind of watered down PS3 style. You had plenty of great games such as the Crash Insane Trilogy, Spyro Reignited, Guilty Gear Strive, and that's just scratching the surface. But PlayStation was slowing down on its identity and somewhat of the variety of games, as the unique titles were still there, but most AAA games were very similar story-driven third-person action games. And the PS5, yeah, there wasn't much here. Now I will give it credit, the menu looks great. It looks more like a modern museum, I suppose. Don't worry, it wasn't synthesia kicking in this time. But the games, yeah, no wonder people say this thing doesn't have any. You'd associate this amount of exclusives with a B-tier console peripheral. Astro's Playroom was pretty fun, at least going off of the demo I played in store kiosks, and from what I've heard, Astrobot is even better. Though with all of these Astro guys, with designs based off PlayStation-associated characters, with this they seem more focused on nostalgia baiting. Sure, the Aegis Astro fits, as Persona 3 Reload came out on a close enough time, but Parappa has not seen a new game in years. Still though, it was always nice to see a celebration of PlayStation's many great games, even though they debuted way before the PS5. And they thought it was a good idea to release a PS5 Pro with all of this in mind. They marketed it as being able to run any PS5 game. Yeah, the DSi does too, I'm showing one off right now. So yeah, I think that's about most of what I want to cover about PlayStation's style over the years, as well as my smaller miscellaneous thoughts on various games and other things associated with the PlayStation brand. Oh, wait, sorry, there is the PlayStation feeder, now we're good. I'll admit I'm sure I forgot to mention or go into enough detail for plenty of games people wanted to see here, or even series that I didn't want to bring up, but simply forgot. So if you have thoughts about other aspects of the PlayStation brand and the like that you want to add in the comments, feel free to. Honestly, I'm definitely interested in Xbox's direction of starting to emphasize the variety of their library of the Series XS. And if they didn't fuck over Tango Gameworks, I could totally see Chai becoming the face of the Xbox brand. Now, sure, Master Chief is everything that appeals to the general hardcore gamer, but come on. When you picture a carefree college dude who aspires of being a huge rock star, you'd probably imagine an inherent guy being specifically a major fan of the Xbox brand. And hey, Microsoft did initially try a lot of experimental games with the original Xbox. They've definitely got the experience at this point. All I can hope for is that Sony can come back to its glory days. Well, this was a nice stream. I had the playlist I was listening to on loop, so hopefully it's playing another song now that I'm about to awaken. Dodged a bullet.